Hundreds of Muslim Americans were rounded up and detained, and some were detained for months in horrific conditions, even after the FBI had cleared them within the first 3 days. Some of them were still detained for 6 to 8 months. Over 1,000 Muslims were detained, and once it reached, I believe it was around 1,200, John Ashcroft quit announcing how many Muslims were in detention because civil advocacy groups, civil rights groups, were becoming very concerned. Some have been detained for years. There's only 4 now. One was convicted who had been detained this entire time in the United States. Now in Guantanamo, that's a different situation. We have hundreds that were rounded up. As far as I know, it's a little over 700 from all around the world. 4 years have passed and no convictions to date. Now we keep hearing that these convictions are coming, but we're waiting for them. But the point I want to make is this is not a mainstream movement. These stories that we hear about radical Islam are not part of the mainstream Muslim agenda. Only one Muslim in the entire United States has been on trial and convicted since September 11th, and that's Zacarias Moussaoui. There are 6 to 9 million Muslims who live in the United States, and 3 have been imprisoned over these 4 years without clear charges or evidence brought yet to trial. So statistically, let's look at the odds there. And this is the point that I'm trying to make. All this sensationalized, these fear-based stories that we are hearing is not part of mainstream Islam. These people are no different than a Timothy McVeigh or a Jim Jones or David Koresh of the Christian world. We abhor the actions that they did in the name of our religion. Okay, the FBI, I'm glad to say, is keeping us all safe and sound, and they're doing their job, and I want you guys to know that they are doing their job. We have members here in Tulsa that I know, friends, who have been visited by the FBI and asked if they have weapons or if they have bought weapons or anything like that. So the FBI is making visits to the households of Muslims. I cannot prove this, but we feel on the next 2 that our phones are being tapped and our emails monitored because we have very strange things that happen to our emails. They disappear and sometimes they come back a few days later, and several people have told me these stories. I can prove that we have had extra special search and questioning when we fly. That's pretty common knowledge. Also, our bank accounts are being monitored. I have a friend who sent some money over to her family in Turkey, and she accidentally got the letter that was meant to go to Homeland Security. It came to her house instead. The bank accidentally sent her the letter. So we know that the bank is monitoring our accounts and what we're doing. And unfortunately, our children have also been interrogated, those of Tulsans, when they have returned from overseas visits. We had an instance, I think it was 2 years ago, where a family was separated from their children for several hours while their little children were interrogated. And that was rather scary for the kids. Okay, the Military Commissions Act. I want you guys to be aware of this because right now it's Muslims, but as we look through history, those people who are feared or hated, if we go from American Indians to the Japanese, to African Americans during the civil rights movements, these are trends that are changing. But in September, President Bush signed a law that allows for secret detention of U.S. citizens or anybody deemed an enemy combatant. Enforced disappearance is now allowed. That means they can come to your house in the middle of the night and take you away without telling your family. Indefinite detention without charge or trial. Legalized torture and loss of something that is so dear to me and all of us is the rights of habeas corpus, which is to see the charges that are brought against you, to have legal counsel, and to have a trial by jury. And our system in the United States is so beautiful, and it is the envy of the world. But this is destroying our situation as being a civil rights leader in the world and a perfect example on how democracies should be. And then the last one is the death sentence. These are all now allowable by law. But I'm wondering why. And I want you guys to leave tonight and wonder why too. Why the change? Where's the need when we've had one person sentenced and convicted? Okay, Muslim charities have also been seized since September 11th. These are 6 of the charities that have been seized. One of the ones that I sent my money to, that with all the marketing materials was telling me was going to orphans, was seized 6 months ago. So the U.S. government has my check, which scares me, because does that at some point deem me an enemy combatant because I'm sending my money to Islamic charity who's sending the money overseas to orphan kids? I certainly hope not, because that was not my intention. My intention was for my money to go to orphan children. Now, when a delegation of Muslims went to Washington, D.C. to talk about why these charities have been closed, and they visited with the Department of Homeland Security and the Treasury Department, basically they are being told that we have no right to see the reasons of why these charities are being closed, and that they are permanently closed without reason. So we've asked for the charges. What's the evidence? Why are you closing these charities? And we are not allowed to see the evidence. This is happening here in the United States. Last year, even more concerning, I don't understand why we need this, Halliburton was awarded $385 million for the detention camps in the United States. They are currently being built. We have military bases all over the United States where we could store people. Why do we need to build additional detention camps? You can Google this and come up with news releases and things if you'd like to read about this more. This is what Muslims are wondering. And I certainly hope it doesn't end up that way. Now, I want to tell you the story about the weathermen because they personally affected me. There's a movie out, it's called The Weather Underground. It's a very documentary, it's a very interesting documentary. In the 1960s and 70s, this was the largest national student movement against the Vietnam War. Hundreds of thousands of students. Some of you all may be familiar with the movement here in this room. It developed into a social justice movement. They were on the news all the time, and they were against the bourgeoisie, or the ruling class, and very militant and very scary. When you watch the movie The Weather Underground, you can see that. Eventually they went underground, and they bombed buildings all across the United States. Over 30 locations were bombed or burned. This happened here in the United States in the 1970s. I know about this story personally because my grandfather worked for Gulf Oil, and their house was burned down by these people. This is a mainstream militant movement. And I just want you to think about the difference about what the FBI is uncovering, how many Muslims are going to jail, how many Muslims are being convicted of crimes, versus a mainstream movement. Okay, let's talk about the media. I think these are probably the images that you're used to seeing on the daily news. I certainly see them. I cringe every time I see them. They make me very upset because this is not what my Muslim friends look like. Certainly hope not. This is what you didn't see after September 11th. This was a picture that was released in one of the obscure newspapers. But wouldn't you have liked to have seen this? Would it have made you feel a little bit better at peace? This was one of the candlelight vigils. Now, here's the one great thing that George Bush did is he went to the mosque and said, you know, our Muslims are our friends. But in the last 2 years, we've had a change in the trend in the media. And now George Bush is calling us Islamic fascists, which is kind of an oxymoron. There's not such a thing. But it's kind of a nice catchphrase. And all Muslims and terrorists are radicals. We hear this on radio stations all the time. People call in, they're in fear, they're scared, they want to send them all back home, but they don't understand that 30% of them are home. They've been here for hundreds of years. So there's a lot of misunderstandings going on, and I really encourage you to read alternative news sources. Although I do like NPR, National Public Radio. I think they do a nice job of reporting. This is what you rarely see. Now, this picture was published in the Tulsa World at like our Christmas, we call them Eid, festivities a couple of years ago. And people got upset. They didn't like this picture. Do you know why? People wrote into the Tulsa World because it was smiling happy Muslims. So, we have